So what do we know about data scientists? You know, it's a relatively new skill set that's emerged really with the explosion of data. And we don't know much about it, but we have some perceptions in the back of our head. And this is really the perception that we have of data scientists today. But the reality is that this is a really, really cool occupation. And this occupation, we're going to lean on this occupation a lot more in the future. And so what James and I are going to do is talk to you about our journey, how we became sales data scientists, and how we utilize data to become better leaders within our organization. So the first thing I want to do is give you an example of a data scientist who I think is really cool. So a quick question. Any NBA or any basketball fans out there? Quick. How many positions on a basketball team? 5, right? Well, this data scientist, this super geek from Stanford, actually was such an NBA fan that he analyzed the data of over 425 NBA basketball players over a series of years, and he looked for statistical correlations that no one had ever looked at before. And he determined that there were actually 13 different positions on a basketball team. You had your role player, your one-of-a-kind player like LeBron James, Michael Jordan. You had a paint protector, a scoring paint protector, an all-NBA first team, all-NBA second team. And really, his methodology taught us all that to build a great team, you needed to look at this rich data set. You needed to explore more options that were readily available. And you needed to define your strategy based on these new data sets and this new information. And now 17 out of the 32 NBA basketball teams uses this gentleman's data to build their teams. Most successfully was the Miami Heat, who uses this data to put role players around LeBron James and you know, their 3 main star players. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about my journey and where my journey began. It really began right around the end of 2010, early 2011. And what happened was CareerBuilder had a really rough time in late 2008, early 2009, as you can imagine. The recession hit us pretty hard. I mean, our business is really tied to the labor market. And as companies started to contract or to go on hiring freezes, like our business model, in a sense, was really exposed to the extent that we were really tied to the labor market. And as the labor market contracted, we contracted. I'm sorry, as the labor market contracted, we contracted. As it expanded, we grew. And so it was really coming out of during the recession when our business started really transforming, and we realized that we had to evolve and we had to become a different type of company. And so we started innovating software, data solutions. We really kind of grew beyond what we were in the past and what we were during the recession. And so I was a successful sales leader within the organization. I have about 15 years of sales and marketing experience. But I was one of the successful sales leaders, and the CEO asked me to take a stab and help us transform the sales force into a much more software and data and solution-oriented sales force. And so, as you can see, I took over everything that was called pre-sales. And so that was all of our marketing and messaging and positioning, all of our research, our B2B brand and B2C brand. But also what was important was that it was our sales development efforts. So it was my responsibility to transform the sales force into this new selling strategy. And the first thing I did, coming out of the recession, it was okay for us to grow, but now flat was not okay. And so we needed to grow, and we needed to grow quick. And the thing about our business is, we are #1 in market share in the United States. And that's a great thing, but it's also a bad thing when it comes to competitors. And we have more than 10,000 competitors that are not only trying to get our market share, but they're also trying to get our people because of the training and development that we put into them. And so when I took on the job, the first thing that I did was dive into what data we had available. Like, what data were we looking at? What data could I utilize to transform our sales organization? And it was bleak. We didn't have much data. I'm not sure if any of you feel the same way, but we were really good at tracking historical sales performance. So at any time, we could tell you how well someone was performing, what percentage of quota they were hitting. We knew how many meetings they were running. We knew what their funnel looked like. Ultimately, the only data that we had was lagging indicator data. We had no idea of any leading indicator data. And so, for example, we didn't know what type of traits were driving performance within our organization. We could not objectively define what skills were driving sales within our organization. Everybody had a different idea about what traits and what skills were driving performance. And so everyone was leading from the gut. And so we had no data to make any type of structural decisions. We didn't know if we had the right reps on the right accounts. We didn't know if we had the right reps selling the right solutions. We were literally in the dark, and we were looking at historical data to make forward-looking decisions. And we were doing a significant amount of training. We were spending a lot of money internally to develop our workforce. But the reality is, it was all event-based, meaning that we would get everybody out of the field, we would put them in a room, and we would teach them a methodology and a process. We would teach them about our products and solutions, and then we would send them back out into the field. And what we learned was that that learning evaporates over time unless it's constantly being reinforced. And so we were doing a lot of training. Our sales leaders were doing a lot of training. But where we had failed as an organization is that we had not standardized coaching. We had not told them the best way to develop their individuals. The second challenge that I was faced with was the growing demand for salespeople. And some of you might say that sales is contracting, but that's absolutely not true. We're going to be adding millions of sales jobs over the next years. And this is actually going to cause more pressure on all of us to retain and develop top talent. And it's not just one industry, it's across all industries. So we're adding more salespeople to the economy. There are about 16 million people earning a living in professional sales today. And so imagine when we add just another million more, where are those salespeople going to come from? We're all going to be competing for those salespeople, and so developing sales talent is going to become even more critical in the future. And the supply of talent is definitely not living up to their end of the bargain. If you take a look at some of this staggering data, for example, there are 33,000 geology jobs in America today, and there are more than 600 college programs churning out geologists. Now, if you compare that to agriculture, there's 35,000 agricultural-related jobs and 247 programs. Go all the way down to sales. Now, I said there were 16 million people in corporate sales. There's another 21 million earning a living or making some type of money in direct sales. So you got 37 million people, and there's less than 100 college programs who are teaching trainable sales skills to our future supply of talent. So this is a problem, right? I'm worried about turnover. I'm worried about competitors. The demand is increasing. We're all adding salespeople, and the supply is not there, right? And we're going to have to, us as corporations or firms are going to have to solve this problem. And so I just thought I would share with you what we did about the situation. The first thing we did was obviously we understood where we were. We looked at what data we had, and we didn't have any, and we acknowledged that. And then we started going to conferences like this. You know, Harvard had a conference up in the northeastern part. We participated in that. And then everyone was saying, you know, everyone's talking about these problems, and everyone's like, oh, we got to partner with colleges, right? Yeah, great. You got to personalize learning. Great. You got to use the cloud, right? You know, you got to standardize coaching. So this is all stuff you're going to hear probably later on in this conference. So we started hearing about all this stuff, and after analyzing where we were, we just decided to do something about it. And so we built it. Not only did we build it, we're using it. We've got a client here to talk to you about how they're using it and the impact that it's made on their business. So the first thing that we did, we partnered with the Global Sales Council, the oldest and most prestigious MBA sales program out of Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. So since 1992, they were the first, and they've been teaching sales skills at the undergraduate and graduate level. And they've got PhDs that are researching sales and sales best practices, and we collaborated with them on a program, a competency model, and a method to collect skills data for stats. And then we went to Harvard, right? We went to the Harvard Innovation Lab, and we found data scientists. We found PhDs, and believe it or not, PhDs will do a lot for you just so that they can get access to your data, so that they can publish information. Take that away. You can get a lot of research by providing data to PhDs because they need data to write dissertations so that they can get published. So we had tenured professors, data scientists at Harvard, building us a data clustering and data analysis model so that we could use to become sales data scientists. And then we built this tool. We found a company up in Boston by the name of Zappoint, unbelievable technology company who had done amazing things with skills extracting and skills mapping and mapping skills to learning. And so we partnered with them to help build us this cloud-based tool which allowed us to assess the skills of an individual, the perceived importance of certain selling styles, capture all that data, analyze it in real time so that we can become better sales leaders, and then obviously provide coaching, sales coaching in a blended learning environment to everybody. So James, if you could, I'd like you to, why don't you tell a little bit about your firm and
Sure.
your journey to becoming a sales scientist?
I own a staffing agency with locations across the country based out of Burbank, California. If I was to kind of speak to talent management and the types of things that happen, obviously we're in a very customer service driven, gregarious, outgoing personality, really fun to be in, but a pain to manage, right? So, I always say, like, I've never interviewed a salesperson that I don't like. I am in love at the end of the interview, right? Like, I'm gonna hire that person, they're gonna change my business tomorrow. And I think that when you're in a sales type industry, the issues that we had was we weren't necessarily hiring the right profile for our customers, but also we had an issue with performance management from the point of view that we had great salespeople, but they were horrible sales leaders. Yeah. And I think that our whole thing was we were looking at our turnover rates, which were really high. We were struggling to distinguish between what skills made our good salespeople great, and why the people that were kind of borderline couldn't make the hop to the next level. So, for us, it was really about looking at how we could change the culture of our business so that we could have a coaching, supportive culture so that eventually, as we bring people in at the lowest level, they could aspire to move through our organization and be successful.
Great. Well, let's talk about the first step. The first step was this data collection step, right? Can you talk about how that step went?
Similar to what you were saying, we didn't really have any data that validated, apart from our kind of standard KPI reports. We didn't know what type of personalities people were and how they would be successful. Good. So we went through utilizing the MoneyBall tool, and we were able to have each of our salespeople do a profile that basically would tell them what type of salesperson they were, but more importantly, what their strong skills were and what their weaknesses were. And I think that was the big piece for me, right? It was creating a profile of a strong salesperson, but knowing what their strengths were so that we could then fill in the gaps and really focus on building up their weaknesses. Okay.
So we identified the strengths and weaknesses of each individual.
Correct.
We provide that information to the sales leader, and then talk about how coaching is, what's coaching done to your organization?
So I think it's a philosophy, right? It's about building an environment where there's trust and commitment to improve somebody's performance in their business. And what we've been able to do is really take people in terms of what their profile is and how they learn and the strengths that they have, and then make sure that in behind that we're really filling the gaps. And I think that rather than kind of an on-the-job, we're going on sales calls today, hey, I'll close that one for you, kind of the gut piece that you were talking about earlier about who our performers were based on gut, we've been able to really kind of stack each of our people and make sure that we're filling in the gaps where they need that so that they can kind of drive it themselves self-paced.
So has the culture changed? Can you, are you more of a sales culture now?
I'd like to say that because it was our 2013 initiative. Yeah. But I think it's definitely a journey, but I think it's helped us create language within our business, right? Everyone goes to MoneyBall each week. They're KPI'd on it in terms of